Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host joining me today is Daniel Sun.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we have a couple of announcements to make.
If you would like to support the show, you can do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast.
For $6.66 a month, we don't support Satan, by the way.
Sultan!
You get weekly premium audio episodes and access to over 290 ad-free episodes.
Or for $9.99, you get all of that plus premium video episodes and bonus video content.
So you can get access to that by going to theoriesofthethirdkind.com and clicking on the Supercast link that's right there on the main page.
If you can't afford a premium membership, but you still want to help us out, you can do so by leaving us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That helps us more than you know.
However, if you don't want to, then that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, space lizard people, Illuminati space lizard people, whoever or whatever you are, to enjoy the show.
Also, just a reminder, this podcast is entirely human-made. No AI was used or harmed in the process other than for the base graphic, which then we throw into Photoshop and do our magic.
And that is the end of the announcements. All right. So this episode today, I consider to be one of the most disturbing topics that I have ever researched. For example, when people learn that I do a conspiracy podcast, I get one of two questions. I get, what is your favorite conspiracy theory? Or what is the most disturbing thing you have ever researched? And I almost always say the finders. And they always say the who, the what. Almost no one knows about this story. And it is 100% factual. And with that being said, this episode today is incredibly disturbing. It involves animal sacrifices, child trafficking, satanic worship, cover ups, and so much more. Honestly, it kind of puts Epstein to shame. And anyone who's wondering if this is real, yes, it is 100%. Back in April of 2019, the FBI released a 324-page report online that details this entire story. It has court documents, witness accounts, police reports, everything. And yes, we read over the entire report and we have verified everything. And I know some of this information might be hard to accept once you hear it. But again, remember, this is all true. So that right there is your warning. So with that being said, let's get into today's episode, The Finders.
On February 4th, 1987, in Tallahassee, Florida, something happened that would spark one of the strangest and most controversial investigations in history. So on that day, someone made an anonymous phone call to the Tallahassee Police Department.
Now, real quick, something that you need to know is that located near downtown Tallahassee is Myers Park. Now, this park has a playground for kids. It has open grassy areas, and it's the kind of place that families bring their kids to kind of like get rid of their energy and stuff. So now that you know that, let's get back into the story.
Okay, so like we stated earlier, it was February 4th, 1987, and that afternoon, someone made an anonymous phone call to the Tallahassee Police Department. The caller said that there were two well-dressed white men, both wearing suits and ties, and they were standing in Myers Park near a blue Dodge van.
The caller went on to say that these men were both just standing there watching six small children play together on a nearby playground. According to the caller, something didn't look right. The children were dirty, covered in insect bites, and were acting like animals. Also, the men in suits looked completely out of place, like they shouldn't be there.
The police ended up sending out some officers to look into this claim. When the officers arrived, the park was quiet. No birthday parties, no picnics, no parents chatting on the benches, gossiping. Just two men dressed like they're headed to an office meeting, standing near a beat-up Dodge van that had Virginia plates.
The officers approached the two men, and they immediately identified themselves as Michael Houlihan and Douglas Ammerman. Also, they both state that they are from Washington, D.C. Then the officers look at the children or look towards the children that are playing on a nearby playground. And that's when everything changes.
There were 6 kids, 4 boys and 2 girls, all of them ranging in age from about 2 to 7 years old. They're covered in insect bites. Their skin looks irritated, dotted, swollen, like they've been scratched raw. They're filthy, like they've been sleeping outside and rolling around in the dirt for days. And some aren't wearing underwear, and none of them look like they've had a bath in a very long time.
And it was at that point that the police decided to look inside of the van that the two men in suits were standing next to. When they opened the back of the doors of the van, the smell just engulfed the police officers. According to the police report, it was a foul odor, like really bad body odor and trash that just came out of the van.
Inside of the van were maps, books, letters scattered around, a mattress in the back that appeared to be used as a bed. The van looked less like transportation and more like a mobile living space. It gave the impression that all eight of them, the two men and the six children, had been living inside.
That was enough for the police. They arrested Houlihan and Ammerman on multiple counts of child abuse, and they were taken to Leon County Jail. Once in custody, they were questioned.
Both men stated that they were the children's teachers. They also stated that they were on their way to Mexico to establish a school for brilliant children. And when the police asked the men where the mothers of the children were, they said the children were being weaned from them.
At this point, the officers shifted their focus to the children. Five of the six kids were unable to communicate, but the oldest child, a 7-year-old girl, she was able to give the officers some information.
She said that their names were Honeybee, John, Franklin, BB, Max, and Mary, and that the two men were their teachers. She also stated that food was given as a reward and they slept outside.
The officer asked why the kids slept outside, and the girls stated that their moms slept inside the house and men would come visit their moms during all hours of the day, and that their moms didn't want them inside there during that period. Now, something else that the officers noticed is that the children had no idea what common household objects were.
They were shown a telephone, television, typewriter, and even a stapler. They had no clue what they were. To these children, the majority of everyday items were foreign to them. It was as if these kids were raised in a completely different reality.
Of course, the officers were incredibly concerned and they began looking into the men. They began pulling up records online and in their computer databases to see if they could find anything about them. And what they discovered when they ran the backgrounds on them is that both men were connected to a group called the Finders.
The Finders is a cult like organization that is led by a man named Marion Petty. The group has about 40 members and operates businesses out of a home and warehouse in Washington, D.C. And it was at this point that the Tallahassee Police Department started to suspect that maybe something larger might be going on, like a child trafficking ring.
Due to this, the very next day, the Tallahassee Police Department contacted the U.S. Customs. Now, at this time in 1987, the United States Customs had a specialized child pornography and protection unit, which is why the Tallahassee Police Department reached out to them because that's what they specialized in during that time period.
So, yeah, the U.S. Customs listened to the report and immediately became concerned, since the Finders Group was already on their radar. Now, since the Finders have multiple properties in Washington, D.C., Customs decided to reach out to the local law enforcement there in Washington, D.C. So that same day, a case is opened by the Washington, D.C. police, and a detective Bradley is assigned to the case.
So within 24 hours, search warrants are executed at the Finders townhouse at 3918 and 3920 West Street in Washington, D.C., and at a warehouse located at 1307 4th Street in Washington, D.C. And what investigators find during their execution of search warrants is incredibly disturbing.
Something you should know is that the U.S. Customs had assigned a special agent named Ramon Martinez to this case. So, Special Agent Martinez flew to Washington, D.C., and helped Detective Bradley with these search warrants.
Now, all of this information that we're about to go over comes from a written memo by Special Agent Martinez and what was found during the execution of those search warrants. So, like we previously stated, the first search was at the West Street townhouse in Washington, D.C.
According to Special Agent Martinez, the building didn't feel like a normal home. There were multiple people on the premises of the home, but what stood out most was one room in particular, a computer room.
Now, this room didn't look like your typical family computer room. To Agent Martinez, it looked like an operations room, the kind of space you would expect in a business or an organization or a place where information is collected and managed. Inside that room were multiple computers, printers, and stacks of documents.
Martinez stated that the documents contained detailed instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. These documents didn't contain vague notes or random scribbles, they contained disturbing instructions.
The documents referenced impregnating female members of the group. It also talked about kidnapping, purchasing, and trading children.
Also in this room were telex messages. These were messages sent between computer terminals that were tied to the other locations. These locations were not only in the United States, but also in various countries across the entire world.
So you have your telex machine that can send a message. And what he was saying is that it was sending messages to other machines, not only in the United States, but all across the world.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, one telex message, it stated that they wanted to order the purchase of two children in Hong Kong, and it was going to be arranged through a contact in the Chinese embassy there. And another telex talked about bank secrecy situations, like how to hide money and stuff like that.
Other documents spoke about high tech transfers to the United Kingdom. There were also notes about properties under the control of the finders, and even references to terrorism, explosives, and how to evade law enforcement.
Special Agent Martinez also wrote that in that same computer room, agents found a detailed summary of what had happened in Tallahassee the previous night: the arrest of the two men, the six children, and the park incident.
They got that information fast.
Real fast.
So, a summary that appeared to have been produced almost immediately after the arrest. And right alongside that summary were instructions that looked like they had been broadcast through a computer network, advising participants to move the children, keep them moving through different jurisdictions, and avoid police attention.
So basically, while Tallahassee police were booking two men into jail the day prior and placing children into protective custody, somewhere inside this network connected to the finders, people were already circulating guidance on how to keep the kids moving, as in other kids that they had elsewhere, keep them moving to stay ahead of law enforcement in case they start looking for additional children or men or members of the group. And as disturbing as this was only the first location.
So, after the West Street townhouse search, investigators moved to the warehouse on 4th Street and executed their search warrant. And just like the previous one, Special Agent Martinez documented his findings in a memo. He stated that the warehouse wasn't just an empty storage area.
It contained a large library, two kitchens, a sauna, a hot tub, and a room described as a, and I quote, video room. A dedicated video room inside a warehouse is not normal. Martinez described it as being set up like an indoctrination center. It looked like the organization, as in the finders, had the ability to produce its own videos.
There were areas that appeared to be training spaces for children. Then, in a residential section of the warehouse, investigators found what was described as an altar. And in that same area were jars containing urine and feces.
Like closed up mason jars with shit and piss inside of them. Disgusting. Martinez also reported that agents found numerous documents describing explicit sexual conduct among group members. Also, they discovered large collections of photographs. Some were nude photos of adults believed to be members of the finders, but there were also photos of children, some nude, and at least one photo that was described in the memo as a child, and I quote, on display, posed in a way that seemed to emphasize the child's genitals.
The memo went on to say that an officer conducting the search came across another photo album and he presented it to Special Agent Martinez for review. The album was titled The Execution of Henrietta and Igor, and inside were photographs showing adults and children dressed in white sheets participating in what appeared to be a ritual centered around the slaughter of two goats.
Now, the photographs showed the goats being killed. They were disemboweled, skinned, and dismembered. In the photographs, the children were present during this. and in some of the photographs, they appeared to be participating.
One image showed a crying child looking at a decapitated goat. One image had the caption of, Ben finds Henrietta's womb. This was a photograph of children handling goat fetuses.
The warehouse also contained thousands of documents that referenced locations around the world, such as London, Germany, the Bahamas, Japan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Africa, Costa Rica, and Europe.
Also, there were folders that were labeled with project names, suggesting structured operations, commercial fronts, or organized work under different names. There were also folders named Palestinian and Pentagon Break In.
After sifting through the thousands of documents, they discovered a room that contained intelligence style files. Now, these weren't just random documents or personal journal entries or diary entries or scribbled notes.
The memo describes the paperwork as files on private families who are not connected to the finders at all. This information appeared to have been gathered systematically.
The process described was that the finder members would respond to local newspaper advertisements for babysitters, tutors, or similar jobs. They'd make contact, as in the finder members would make contact with these families that needed babysitting or tutors or anything like that, gather as much information as they could on the family, such as their habits, their identity, their occupation, their routines. They would even sit outside their house and spy on this family and write everything out, and they would save it.
There were also large amounts of information collected on child care organizations. The memo stated that the purpose of the information was unknown, though.
However, Special Agent Martinez did state that those files particularly looked like surveillance gathering, that the finders were collecting data on families with children, and he didn't know why.
So that is what was found during the search warrants on the two locations connected to the group, the finders. Now, the very next day, newspaper headlines explode.
Right there on the front page of many popular newspapers, it talked about two men in suits arrested in a Tallahassee park with six dirty children, and that those men may be connected to a Washington, D.C. group called the Finders. And it was at that point that the FBI opens up an investigation into the case.
Now, during this time in the late 80s, stories about hidden cults, ritual abuse, and secret networks are everywhere. Technically, satanic panic was still going on.
Yep.
And due to this, people were already nervous and began talking between themselves. Word eventually gets out about what was found during the search warrants, and that leads to people talking about satanic rituals, child pornography, and even child trafficking being involved or covered up.
Yep, lots of rumors and everything. And due to this, a few weeks later in Washington, D.C., the Metropolitan Police Department holds a press conference. During it, they state, and we quote, "Despite the rumors that have circulated, during our search warrants, we have not uncovered evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. The group, the Finders, may live an unusual lifestyle, but unusual does not automatically mean illegal." End quote.
So that same day in Florida, the medical angle begins to shift as well. Early reporting suggested that there were possible signs of sexual abuse of the six children. However, the medical expert who made that claim ended up taking it all back. The medical expert came forward and stated that they wanted to clarify and say, if sexual abuse exists, it doesn't appear recent in the children. That still means that they were sexually abused,
Yep.
just not recently.
Shortly after that, a spokeswoman for the group, the Finders, decides to speak out to reporters. This spokeswoman, a woman named Diane Sherwood, she states that five women who are part of the group, the Finders, and are also the mother of the six children who were taken into custody in Florida, that those women are currently traveling to Florida to reclaim their kids.
The spokeswoman, Diane, goes on to say that the women had been away in San Francisco, writing, editing, and networking, while the men in the group took the children camping. The spokeswoman also stated that the mothers did try to contact Tallahassee police earlier, but the police were overwhelmed with false calls from strangers pretending to be parents.
Around this time, the FBI publicly announces that it has not found evidence of federal violations, no kidnapping, no proof of child pornography, and that they are winding down their investigation into the Finders.
In the middle of all this confusion, Special Agent Martinez tried to follow up in his investigation. There had been plans for him to sit down with Detective Bradley at the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C.
Now, the purpose of this meeting was simple. They wanted to review the materials that had been seized from the finder's properties. They wanted to look at boxes of documents, photographs, computer equipment, travel records, all of that stuff. All of it had already caused enough concern within the public, and this is what pretty much pushed Special Agent Martinez into wanting to see exactly what had been collected and how it was currently being handled.
So Special Agent Martinez went to Washington, D.C. When he arrived, Detective Bradley was not available. Instead of meeting with the detective directly, Martinez found himself speaking with someone else, a third party who agreed to talk, but only off the record.
According to Special Agent Martinez's memo, he was told that all of the data and materials seized from the finder's property had been turned over to the U.S. State Department. The State Department had reviewed everything and determined that everything was legal. And because of that, no action would be taken on that front.
Martinez also stated in his memo that he was then told by the third party that the investigation into the finders had become a CIA internal matter. He also wrote that a Metropolitan Police Department report related to the case had been classified, secret, and was not available for review anymore.
After that meeting, the charges of the two men, Michael Houlihan and Douglas Ammerman, those charges were dropped, and the children were returned to their mothers. The files were sealed. All the agencies stepped away from the story. No major prosecution was pursued, and the finder's case quietly faded away from the public's attention. And that right there is the story of the finders. But just like every week, our episode does not stop here, because now we are going to get into the strange facts and findings that we uncovered while researching this episode.
All right, so our first strange fact and finding is about the group, the Finders. So we began digging through documents, investigations, and newspaper reports to try and find any reports of this group before 1987.
Now, what we discovered is that for many years, this group known as the Finders, they moved quietly around Washington, D.C., rarely making headlines and never drawing any serious attention to themselves. To the majority of outsiders who looked into this group, the Finders looked like a strange but harmless group of former hippies who had grown older, bought property, and built a tight knit, secretive community. However, that was not the case.
At the center of the group was its founder, Marion David Petty, a U.S. Air Force Master Sergeant. Marion had a wife named Isabel, and between 1957 to 1961, she worked as a support secretary for the CIA in Frankfurt, Germany.
A few years later, in 1964, Marion retired from the military and formed a group that he called the Seekers, which would later become the Finders. Now, this group was very secretive. Outsiders weren't given a clear explanation of what the group believed. However, it was stated that Marion created this group as a way to explore oneself and for them as a whole, as in the group, to focus on preparing for the future.
By the 1980s, the Finders was a group of educated individuals who had walked away from conventional careers. The members tended to take temporary work in Washington, D.C., but avoided permanent employment. Steady careers, in their view, interfered with their goals.
The group's outward appearance evolved as well. All of the members went from looking like hippies to all wearing business suits. By the early 1980s, the group had accumulated real estate holdings estimated at over $2 million.
Now, the Washington City paper once reported that the members of the group could often be seen walking the streets, following people home, taking notes, and photographing buildings and individuals. The group members seemed to observe more than they spoke.
At some point during this period, the members of the group were segregated by sex. The women lived at the townhouse, and the men relocated to the warehouse on 4th Street. Of course, both of those were in Washington, D.C.
Also, the group decided to raise children as a group rather than individually by their biological parents. They believed they were replicating what they thought was an ancient Native American lifestyle. The goal was to raise a generation of toughened children.
So Marion did an interview where he stated that the group functioned as an extended family under his authority. Members shared responsibility for all children.
Marion would sometimes identify what he saw as a character flaw in an adult member and send that person away on what he called an adventure. These separations could last months, and during that time, parents would not see their biological children, so the children were cared for collectively by the others in the group. Also, the children were not enrolled in traditional schools.
Dude, that's crazy. A character flaw, and then you don't get to see your kid for months? Fuck,
Wonder what kind of character flaw he meant.
I don't know. It didn't give specifics. That's all it stated.
Wonder if it's like physical or was it like mental.
You walk weird. You're going to be sent out for a few months. We don't want little Eddie to see you walk around like that.
Your nostrils are uneven.
You got a crooked, your mustache is crooked. All right. Sorry. Got to go with a little humor. All right. Let's get back to the serious part. So the Finders did own a farm in Madison County, and neighbors reported hearing children crying out for their parents all throughout the night. Despite unconventional behavior and children crying out loud, the group was rarely the subject of serious complaints before 1987. However, there were a few complaints.
For example, in 1982, a police complaint led to an investigation, but authorities concluded there was no criminal activity. In 1984, a researcher named Daniel Brandt was contacted by members of the Finders. They told him they were part of something called the Information Bank.
They also offered Daniel a computer program that he needed, free of charge. And that was pretty unusual because at the time, computer software wasn't casually handed out by strangers.
Now, Brandt continued to talk with the members of the group, and what stood out to him is that the members appeared to be seasoned, world class travelers. They had been to numerous Eastern countries during the Cold War era.
Now, this was a time when traveling to that area of the world wasn't just, casual tourism. Like you couldn't buy a flight over to the Soviet Union or anything like that. It required access, planning, and connections. However, this small group of roughly 40 adults seemed to move freely across international borders. Also, according to Daniel, they, as in the Finders, had no visible income that could explain how they financed such extensive travel and how they afforded all their friggin' homes and warehouses and stuff and farmlands. CIA funded it.
Something else worth noting is that in December of 1986, something unusual was discovered behind the group's townhouse. So, Washington, D.C. police found an ornate tombstone and a circle of stones arranged about 70 yards behind the property. The significance of the stones was unclear.
So by early 1987, this group was barely known to the outside world. They hadn't made any huge headlines as of yet. And of course, everything blew up for them after the Tallahassee incident that happened, I think in what was it, February of 1987?
Yeah.
But after that incident, not much happened.
Then in 1999, an investigator did a story on the group and discovered that they still existed. However, a few years later, on October 24, 2003, the group's leader, Marion, ended up passing away. After that, it is stated that the group fell apart.
Yeah, very weird. All right, so let's talk about our next strange fact and finding, which is called years later. So in 1993, 6 years after the FBI stated that the Finders didn't do anything wrong, the Justice Department decided to release some documents. In these documents are Special Agent Martinez's reports, where he states that he was told to back away from the case and it is being handled by the CIA. You remember when we talked about that?
It's an internal matter.
Yep.
And at the same time, the Justice Department opens a new investigation into the Finders to determine whether the CIA had put a stop to the 1987 investigation. In the material connected to that reopening, one document also claims the CIA made contact and admitted to owning the Finders organization as a front for a domestic computer training operation, but said it had gone bad. Another document talks about an operation called Future Enterprises, which tied to computer training, where a Finders member was hired and later dismissed when the connection to the group was exposed.
Very odd. So the CIA admitted to owning the Finders organization as a front, for a computer training operation.
So they were a front of child trafficking?
I guess so. Surprise, surprise, running drugs and children. Doesn't surprise me much with the CIA.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So besides that, nothing ever came from the Justice Department's investigation. And again, the case went back into the darkness away from the public eye. Finally, like we stated earlier, in 2019, the FBI released hundreds of documents related to the Finders case, noting on the FBI Vault website, where you can find this paperwork at, that it was their most requested topic. Hmm.
Well, that was definitely back in 2019 because we know which one's most requested
Requested
now.
now. Yeah, Epstein.
Yeah. All right. So our next strange fact I'm finding is called FBI documents. So, like we stated earlier, in February 2019, the FBI released over 300 documents about the finders. And as we were digging through the documents, we stumbled upon something very interesting. At page 48 of the document, there's a diagram of what looks like a school and the location of a 7-foot tunnel entrance that is hidden from the street.
And that's what it literally says on this diagram.
Tunnel entrance.
Yeah, 7-foot tunnel entrance hidden from the street. It says classroom 1, classroom 2, and then there's another tunnel by classroom 3. Damn. Okay. And here you go. Here's that document right there for you to take a look at. And if you are listening to us, you can go to theoriesofthethirdkind.com, click on today's episode, and the document will be right there for you to take a look at as well. Or you can go to YouTube and watch us there. However, if you do, please subscribe. It helps us out. We're trying to get our 100K plaque.
Is this a diagram of McMartin?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we go into next.
Wow.
So that was on page 48. And on the next page, page 49, there is a document that discusses the tunnels found at McMartin Preschool, which has nothing to do with the Finders case at all. McMartin Preschool is never mentioned again in the over 300 pages of the Finders, and neither are tunnels in general. So if you don't know what the McMartin Preschool case is, it's okay. We're going to give you a refresher, and then we're going to read the document.
All right, so the McMartin preschool case first came to light on August 12, 1983, when a mother, Judy Johnson, reported to Manhattan Beach, California police that her 2-year-old son had been molested by a teacher at the McMartin preschool. On September 8, 1983, police sent a letter to more than 200 parents suggesting possible abuse and asking them to question their children, which triggered a wave of additional allegations.
An official investigation started, and it uncovered hundreds of bizarre allegations. For example, some of the children claimed that they were taken underneath the preschool of McMartin and into secret tunnels where they performed satanic rituals, animal sacrifices, and other things. Some of the children claimed that they were being flown to other locations.
The alleged abuse was said to have occurred mainly between 1982 and 1983. Formal charges were filed in 1984. The first trial began on July 13, 1987, and after years of proceedings, the final charges were dismissed in 1990 after juries failed to reach convictions.
At the time, it was the longest and most expensive criminal trial in United States history, and no one was convicted. So, yeah, it's weird that this diagram and document was included in the Finder's document that was released by the FBI. But like I said, we have both of those. Here's the second one, page 49, and it states at the top, the tunnels found at the McMartin preschool, a preliminary report. And it goes on to say a formal report will be released when forensic tests are concluded. It says 45-foot tunnel, 9-foot wide subterranean entrance found under west wall of the quote unquote dog room, classroom 4, and then it has redacted classroom. Avocado tree roots cut on both sides of the entrance. Disney bag, copyright 1982, found 4.5 feet below the classroom floor and 3 inches to 6 inches in from the entrance and under foundation, classroom 4. Tunnels proceeded south and then east 45 feet through classrooms 4 and 3, and north, then cast 10 feet within classroom floor. Then it talks about the size of the tunnels, and a 9-foot wide chamber was found along the tunnel. Top of the chamber and top of sections of the tunnel had layers of plywood covered with paper, which had apparently been supported by cinder blocks.
Tunnel features made it evident that the tunnel was hand dug.
Yeah, it goes on to talk about other things with the tunnel, and then it talks about other significant facts. A small white plastic plate with 3 pentagrams hand drawn on the top of it with light green paint was found by the archaeologist in the dirt in the play yard. Many other artifacts were found. No doorknobs were on classroom 3 door, only a deadbolt lock. Each classroom had an on and off light switch labeled fire alarm. Systems did not connect to the fire station, but was used as an alert within the school. More than 2,000 artifacts were found under the school, including over 100 animal bones. Due to severe time constraints, our team was unable to further explore the extent of the tunnel networks. And then it talks about the diagram on the prior page, which then states that the preschool had been demolished. That is weird that this document was included in the finder's case.
Yeah, didn't they say that there was no tunnel at McMartin?
Yeah, that's what they stated. But there was a tunnel.
Yeah.
So there was tunnels everywhere. There's tunnels in Austin. There's supposedly tunnels. Where was it? In Washington that connect to the Elefantis' pizza place, Comet Ping Pong.
Comet ping pong.
Yeah. So
Mm.
these sick, pedophile, satanic, whatever people. Mm,
And I totally forgot that McMartin was in California
yeah.
because our premium episode, the I still have a hard time saying it. Presidio child abuse allegation case is in California too, and it's pretty much right along with this, it seems.
Yeah. So if you want to go listen to our premium episode, like Dan said, the Presidio scandal, which is another child abuse scandal where a U.S. Army base is accused of,
Sexually assaulting toddlers and possibly satanic rituals.
yeah, involved with the kids. So go check that out, theoriesofthethirdkind.com, if you want to. No pressure.
All right. So our last strange fact and finding is called explanation. So you all remember how during the search warrant of the finder's address, one of the officers came across a photo album and gave it to Special Agent Martinez for review.
The album was titled The Execution of Henrietta and Igor, and inside of it was photographs showing adults and children dressed in white sheets participating in what appeared to be a ritual centered around the slaughter of 2 goats. And then those photographs showed the goats being killed, that they were disemboweled, skinned, and dismembered.
In the photographs, the children were present, and in some images, they appeared to be participating. One image showed a crying child looking at a decapitated goat. One image had the caption of Ben finds Henrietta's womb. This was a photograph of children handling goat fetuses.
So, why do we mention all that? Well, the finder's spokesperson was questioned about that finding, that album, and those photographs, and the goat. And they actually offered an explanation. The spokesperson stated that the goats were butchered for food. They stated that the children were present because it was meant to be educational. And they also stated that the photos were taken as keepsakes. That is what they legitimately stated. Oh my God, little weird, huh?
I feel like maybe a little too young for that, but then again, I'm like trying to think back when I went hunting with my dad. I didn't really, they didn't let the hunting club that we were with, the kids could like kind of sit back and watch. We weren't allowed to like participate because that's something like not really, you don't want a little kid going in there getting blood everywhere, playing with guts and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's weird that these adults were wearing white gowns, white sheets, and the children were too. They were inside of a house. They slaughtered the goat in the house, and it was 2 of them. They were disemboweled, skinned, and dismembered. And some of the children were crying at the decapitated goat. I mean,
It seems like the kids were just a little too young for this.
it seemed like it was like a satanic ritual.
Yeah.
That's what it seemed like. Some weird ritual with the fucking goats.
The Hadron Collider, where was that at? In Sweden? Didn't they have like where they had like a sacrifice going on with goats and stuff in the bathrooms? Remember that?
No, I don't remember that. Hold on, we're gonna have to pull that up. Let's look at our documents and see.
What was that episode called? What is that group in
CERN?
CERN? Yeah.
The only thing we talk about with sacrifices is the theory section in CERN, where we talk about human sacrifices as being like a part of the thing to appease an entity which grants individuals and world leaders with certain powers or status or promises.
I remember there was one of the places supposedly people were caught sacrificing a goat in the bathroom because it was the only place that really looked like a drain.
Okay. Well,
Well, if you know what the hell I'm talking about, let us
yeah,
know.
let us know.
All these topics kind of like combine together, but I swore that there was like an incident where like they it was like reported because someone like a couple of guys or couple of people were like sacrificing a goat in the bathroom where they were draining the blood. I mean, out of all the places, I guess that would be the best, but
I don't know. If you know what Dan's talking about, send us an email or shoot us a message or comment down below.
or call our third kind hotline.
Yes, which is 707-390-0655. Call us and leave a voicemail, and we will listen to it on our Third Kind Hotline episode.
Hotline.
All right, so let's get into our theory section and discuss the multiple different theories as to what this finders group could actually be. All right, so our first theory is called intelligence front. This theory claims that the finders group were not simply a cult, but a group connected to U.S. intelligence, possibly functioning as an informal front or experimental social project tied to intelligence agencies. Supporters of this theory point to the founder, Marion Petty's background. Marion had contact with former OSS personnel, which OSS was formerly, the CIA was formerly OSS, and he had received counterintelligence training and had associations with individuals connected to Air Force intelligence and the CIA. Also, Marion's wife worked as a support secretary for the CIA in Frankfurt during the late 1950s and early 1960s. Also, his son was reportedly connected to CIA linked Air America operations during the Vietnam War. Then there's the travel. Members of the finders reportedly traveled extensively to Eastern countries during the Cold War. These were not casual vacation spots at the time. Travel behind the Iron Curtain required documentation and often scrutiny. Yet this small group of around 40 adults with no clear visible income appeared to move internationally with ease. Also, during the 1987 investigation, Special Agent Martinez was told that the matter had become a CIA internal issue. So, based on all of that information, a lot of people assume that the finders may have been a low profile intelligence group. To believers in this theory, those elements suggest protection or redirection at higher levels. They argue that the finders may have been operating a low profile intelligence linked entity under the cover of being a cult. Kinda.
Kind of.
Yeah. So, what's this other theory?
All right, so the next theory that we have is called social experiment. This theory suggests that the finders were an intentional long term social experiment designed to test alternative family structures, child rearing models, and psychological development techniques. The group's child rearing practices were highly unconventional. Beginning around 1980, children were raised communally instead of by biological parents. Members shared parental responsibility. Parents could be separated from their children for months at a time if Marion decided they needed to go on an adventure to correct a character flaw. Children were not enrolled in traditional schools. And to supporters of this theory, the finders look like an extreme but intentional experiment in reshaping human development. The secrecy surrounding their beliefs may have been less about hiding crimes and more about maintaining internal cohesion and protecting the experiment from outside interference.
I'm going to hold my tongue until the end and give my personal thoughts at the end, but I don't know. All right. So, this next theory is called child trafficking cover up. This theory claims that the finders were involved in child trafficking and that the 1987 investigation was intentionally shut down before the full truth came out. This theory centers on the February 4th, 1987 arrest in Tallahassee, Florida, when two men associated with the finders were found in a park with six children. Witnesses described the children as unkempt and unsupervised. Authorities initially suspected possible child abuse or kidnapping. When the police searched finders' properties in Washington, D.C., they found documents referencing travel, coded records, and computer equipment. Some early internal communications from investigators suggested concern about possible international movement of children. Supporters of this theory highlight that materials were reportedly turned over to the State Department, that a Metropolitan Police report was classified, and that the FBI withdrew from the case. They argue that these actions suggest a premature shutdown of a deeper investigation. However, official findings at the time concluded that there was no evidence of an organized child trafficking ring, and charges related to abuse were not sustained in court.
Hmm.
Hmm, I don't know.
All right, the next theory is called urban surveillance collective. This theory focuses on reports that members of the finders were seen walking through Washington, D.C., following people home, taking notes, and photographing buildings. sound like those auditors.
Yeah.
Now, the Washington City paper described behavior that resembled surveillance rather than casual wandering. Researcher Daniel Brandt reported that members approached him under different identities and affiliations, including journalism related covers. If the group truly called itself the Information Bank, that name alone suggests a focus on gathering and storing data. Supporters of this theory argue that the finders may have operated as a private intelligence gathering network, collecting information on individuals, institutions, or urban environments. Their warehouse reportedly contained computers and records during a time when personal data collection was far less common. Critics of the group say that their activities looked less like spiritual wandering, more like organized observation.
Kind of see that. Boy, I want to say something so bad, but I'm going to wait because we're going to go into our last theory and then to our own personal thoughts and theories. So the last theory is called harmless commune. According to this theory, the finders were simply a strange but legal communal group that practiced unconventional parenting and alternative living. Police investigations in 1982 found no criminal activity. After the 1987 Tallahassee arrests, abuse charges were not sustained in court. The FBI investigation closed after several months, concluding there was no evidence of organized trafficking or foreign intelligence activity. Under this theory, the finders were secretive and odd, but not criminal. Their wealth may have come from pooled resources and quiet professional work. Their travel may have been legitimate. Their child rearing methods may have been misguided, but not illegal. From this perspective, the mystery surrounding the finders grew larger than the facts themselves. And that right there is the last theory. And we're going to get into our own personal thoughts and theories. And I'm going to ask you, Dan, what is your whole thoughts around this? Do you believe the finders were child trafficking? Do you believe they were connected to the government or any intelligence community? Or do you believe this entire story was made up?
I don't think they were child trafficking, but I do believe that from what we found here, it seems like they were doing some type of experiment and they were actually collecting information. But then it makes me question though, when the parents of the or the mothers of the kids came and picked up the kids, were they truly the kids' mothers? Because nowhere said like that it actually verified that at all. So it could have been just 5 or 6 randomly selected women of the finders group saying, "Oh, this is my child."
So the court had to release the children. So the children were initially taken to an undisclosed location whenever the investigation and stuff was taking place. And then the spokesperson, Diana Sherwood, for the finders, came forward and said, "Hey, the mothers they're coming from Washington D.C. to Tallahassee." And
They
then
were in,
once,
they were in San Francisco.
yeah, but she stated prior to that they were in San Francisco, but they came back to Washington D.C.
And they went to
and
Tallahassee.
then they went to Tallahassee. But upon arriving in Tallahassee, I read a report that stated that the mothers did have issues getting their children for a few days because they couldn't verify their identity. And eventually, the police were like, "Fuck it, you can have the kids," and gave them over.
See,
So
that's where it starts to get a little iffy because that's just like it reminds me of that one kid that got kidnapped and the police like, "Hey, we found your child," and then come to find out it's like a completely different kid that they gave to the mother or whatever.
yep.
So I don't know about child trafficking, but then again, with the mothers not being 100% verified, it could be. But I do think it was like probably like a government social experiment raising these kids in a communal type thing. But then I don't know about it being like toughening up. I don't. All I know is this shit wasn't harmless. They were collecting some type of information. It was some type of government experiment that they were doing. I just don't know fully if it was child trafficking, even though they did have documents on how to take kids.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm stuck on this one, to be honest.
I'm going to say it's one of two things. This is what I've narrowed it down to. It's either one, it's a CIA group, like a splinter group. CIA created this finders group. They used Marion Petty as the front man. He created it. And they told him, "Hey, we need you to gather information on certain individuals." He's like, "Okay." So he creates this group of people, trains them under what he knows, and then collects information on individuals, institutions, pretty much a private intelligence gathering network. And then it evolves into them selling children to international politicians and then using that data as blackmail so that the CIA then can get them to do their bidding. Same thing as what happened with Epstein. Same thing that happened with Diddy and the CIA using all of the videos at the Diddy party against these celebrities. Same thing with Hugh Hefner of the Playboy Mansion, how the CIA was using him to record all these celebrities to film them having relations with other people and then blackmailing them. It's all about control. That's what I truly believe. This was a CIA front used as a way to blackmail people and get them to do what they want them to do. Or it's number two. So what we know is that they were able to freely travel back and forth Soviet Union during the Cold War, which is crazy. So maybe Soviet Union was like, let's create a group and send them over to the United States and then pretend like they're doing all these crazy things with kids and make it seem like their politicians are trafficking children and the politicians don't do anything about it. So they seem complicit, and that breaks the trust of the American people in their government. And this is a time during the Cold War, 1987. So it would be a great tactic. But then again, why didn't the United States just come out and say, hey, these are Soviets, coming over here trying to traffic children and they're trying to break the trust of America, which is why it makes me lean more towards it was a CIA thing.
I feel like if they came out and said that, people would be pointing fingers at the CIA, be like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're lying," because now you're just trying to blame it on them because you got caught.
Yeah.
But now it makes me start to wonder: these kids, were they actually from the other countries?
No, they were from well, 5 of 6 of them were unable to communicate. They were kept, like, in conditions to where they were not showing the outside world the majority of their life.
The only reason I'm like questioning this is like maybe they weren't. I mean, technically they were kind of child trafficking, but this was a social experiment to train kids, brainwash them at a young age to become spies.
Spies.
Spies. Because let's say if they were from other countries, they could travel freely back and forth and all that stuff. Just to get them at a young age, train them up. Pretty much, they they were talking about toughening up the kids. Pretty much, they were training them at a very young age to become like little assassin spies.
So, like, kinda like John Wicks or whatever.
Yeah. So pretty much, later on when they get a little bit older, they can send them back there. They blend in. Like, why would you take the kids to the playground if you're trafficking? Probably trying to let them see how other kids play, interact, get them to realize, like, how to, like, blend in with other kids and shit like that.
Maybe those 2 guys were like, "Man, these fucking kids inside this van, I can't take this shit. They smell. They're running around and screaming. Just get them the fuck out of here and play on the playground." And they get on the playground and they sit by the van. They're smoking a cigarette, and the kids are all acting like wild animals. And they're like, "Man, fuck these kids." Not literally, but they're sitting there smoking the cigarettes. All of a sudden, a police officer rolls up in the car, and they're like, "God dang, just our luck. Here's the police," and they arrest them.
Because I'm thinking, like, if it was like a intelligence gathering network, wouldn't that be the best way to do it? Brainwash these kids so later on in like they keep like they could go join the army in these other countries, provide information back to CIA.
You're a double spy.
Double spy.
Well, we would love to hear what you think and what your theory is. Feel free to comment down below, or you can send us an email to Aaron, Aaron, at Theories of the Third Kind, or Dan, Dan, at Theories of the Third Kind. We would love to hear from you.
That's right. Do it.
Also, if for some reason you could not get enough of us today, you can sign up to our premium membership on Supercast and get access to our premium episode, which is just as disturbing as this episode.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But with that being said, that is pretty much the entire episode over the Finders. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I honestly I started to forget about it. Then, like you said, as soon as we started getting into this, it all came back, and I'm just like, holy shit, yeah, I never liked this episode.
Yeah. It is a disturbing topic, but it is one I always talk to people about who ask me, hey, what's your most craziest topic? I always say the Finders because it is very weird.
Just wait till we get to the Presidio episode.
Weirder?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Yes, it is, in fact. And those kids had it rough.
Well, with that being said, I want to thank you for joining us today. And again, thank you for your support and love. Without you, we could not do this.
That's right. Much love. Thank you.
Yes. So, Dan, do you want to roll us out?
Sure will. It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.